Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we break down dense material into clear, actionable knowledge, making sure you get informed fast. Today we've put together a lesson that's really custom built for anyone preparing for major exams or, frankly, anyone who wants a solid foundation in global affairs and economic history.
It's a great pairing. We're looking at two topics that seem worlds apart, but they're connected by this one core idea: the control of essential resources. We're going to kick things off with a very contemporary issue, a geopolitical flashpoint, really, which is the strategic fight over Greenland.
And once we've got that groundwork, we'll pivot to something historical, a bit of a counterpoint. We'll explore the North American technocracy movement from the 1930s. This was a group that seriously proposed replacing the entire political and economic system with one run by, well, by engineers. So let's jump in, starting with the geopolitics of the far north. The idea of the U.S. buying Greenland. Sounds like a joke, but it's a very serious, revived ambition that's been making headlines. Our sources confirm that President Donald Trump brought this idea back to the table, citing national security.
And he went even further. He actually refused to rule out using force to get control, which, you can imagine, sent absolute shockwaves through Denmark.
A key NATO ally.
Exactly. And what's really notable here isn't just the talk, it's the action. There was the appointment of Jeff Landry, the governor of Louisiana, as the U.S. Special Envoy to Greenland.
And he was pretty blunt about his mission, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He publicly stated this was, and I'm quoting, a volunteer position to make Greenland a part of the U.S. The official justification was all about Greenland's strategic location and mineral wealth.
Right, that it was just a necessity for U.S. national security. But why the sudden, intense focus? Why has Greenland become so critical right now?
It's really where climate change and geopolitics collide. Two main reasons. First, that strategic location. As the Arctic ice melts, new shipping lanes are opening up, things like the Northwest Passage. That fundamentally changes global trade and military movement.
And the second reason?
The mineral wealth. Greenland is sitting on a massive reserve of rare earth elements, the kind of critical minerals you need for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. In today's world, securing a supply chain for those is a huge geopolitical win.
So this kind of aggressive pursuit, it must have triggered a pretty furious diplomatic response.
Oh, he did. And it was all centered on the principle of self-determination.
Caso você esteja gostando desse conteúdo, por gentileza, assista ao vídeo até o final. Isso ajuda muito o canal e nos incentiva a continuar o nosso trabalho.
The reaction from Denmark was immediate. Their foreign minister, Lars Rasmussen, called the appointment deeply upsetting. He issued a formal warning that Washington had to respect the sovereignty of the entire kingdom, which is Denmark, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland.
And what about the Greenlanders themselves, the people who actually live there?
They were just as clear. Prime Minister Jens-Frederik Nielsen made a statement saying, Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. He insisted their territorial integrity must be respected and that, they decide their own future.
Even the EU got involved, right?
They did. The EU Commission president expressed full solidarity with Denmark and Greenland.
So for anyone studying this, it's important to understand Greenland's current status. It's semi-autonomous, has been since 1979.
Right. They handle most of their own domestic affairs, but defense and foreign policy, that's still run from Copenhagen. And while most Greenlanders do want eventual independence from Denmark, public opinion is overwhelmingly against joining the United States.
That's a crucial point. So we have this clear tension. It's national security and economic interest on one side, clashing with national sovereignty on the other.
Exactly. Who controls the resources unlocked by the melting ice? That's the core question.
And that question of resource control is the perfect bridge to our second topic. We're moving from a conflict within the current system to a movement that wanted to throw the entire system out. Let's talk about the technocracy movement.
Right. So the technocracy movement was most active in the U.S. and Canada, right in the middle of the Great Depression. And their idea was, well, it was radical. They argued that scientists and engineers should be running the economy, not politicians or business leaders.
A pretty wild idea. Where did it come from?
Its roots are in the early 20th century, with progressive engineers who felt industrial society had just gotten too complex for traditional politics and finance. You see a lot of that in the work of the economist Thorstein Veblen, especially his 1921 book, The Engineers and the Price System.
But the term itself is a bit older.
A little bit. It was coined in 1919 by a man named William H. Smith.
So the Great Depression hits, and suddenly this idea doesn't seem so crazy to a lot of people. It must have felt like a validation of everything they were saying.
Precisely. The founder, a man named Howard Scott, He started the Technical Alliance, which began this huge energy survey of North America. Their argument was that industry had created potential abundance. We could make more than enough for everyone. But the price system, money, debt, profit, was getting in the way. It was forcing an artificial scarcity on people.
So the system was basically choking on its own productivity, but the movement's peak was incredibly brief. It flared up and then, just as quickly, it faded. Why didn't it stick?
Well, there are a few reasons. A big one was the political landscape just changed so dramatically with Franklin D. Roosevelt and the New Deal. The New Deal offered a path forward that was radical enough to tackle the Depression, but didn't require completely throwing out capitalism and democracy. It made technocracy seem too extreme.
And Howard Scott himself had some credibility issues, didn't he?
He did. And this was a huge blow. The movement made a specific prediction. They said the price system would collapse prior to 1940.
And when 1940 came and went.
Exactly. When the system was still standing, their credibility took a massive hit. The revolutionary urgency was just gone. Some historians also say they just never came up with a viable political plan for how to actually achieve their goals. They had the blueprint, but no idea how to build it.
But what a blueprint it was. Even though it failed, we have to talk about the plan for the Technate. This is where it goes from a vague idea to a fully structured scientific society. And the most radical part was their replacement for money.
Absolutely. The technocrats saw money as completely arbitrary, fluctuating based on supply and demand. They reasoned that since energy is the one constant, the one basic measure in all production, it should be the foundation for the entire economy. That was their energy theory of value.
So instead of dollars, you'd be dealing in
ergs and joules, objective scientific units of energy.
Okay, so you have this energy-based currency. How do you actually distribute it to people?
Through something they called the Continental Accounting System, or CAS. It issued what they called energy certificates. And these weren't like paper money. They were tied directly to an individual's ID, which was coded using a Dewey Decimal System to track everything about them.
That sounds incredibly controlling. What were the rules for using these certificates? I mean, if you can't save them, what's the incentive to do anything?
That was the point.
Yeah.
The rules were designed to prevent anyone from accumulating wealth. First, everyone got an equal allotment of energy. Didn't matter if you were working, a child under 25, or retired over 45. Everyone got the same.
A kind of universal basic income, but with energy.
More radical, because of the second rule. You could not trade, barter, or hoard the certificates. They expired. Once you bought something, the certificate was canceled, it didn't circulate. They engineered a system with zero savings and forced consumption.
The logistics of that in the 1930s, it seems impossible. They must have been banking on some future technology to run it all.
They absolutely were. Howard Scott was a huge believer in automation. He predicted that machines like the early IBM computers would eventually replace almost every job, blue-collar, white-collar, even engineers. In his view, that technological unemployment made an automated system like the CAS not just possible, but necessary.
Now let's talk about the map. They weren't just proposing a new economy, they wanted a new country, a new political unit called the Technate.
Yes, the Technate was their name for the geographical area needed for self-sufficiency. And for them, that was the entire North American continent, from Panama to the North Pole. The governance was purely functional. They divided the continent into quadrangles, defined by degrees of latitude and longitude.
So they were drawing a new political map based on geometry, completely ignoring existing borders, states, countries. All gone.
All gone. And the leadership was a strict top-down hierarchy. Directors were appointed, not elected, all the way up to the continental director. There was no voting. To maximize efficiency, they even proposed a new work cycle. 4 hours a day for 4 days straight, followed by 3 days off.
A 4-hour workday? That sounds like something you hear out of Silicon Valley today. But they also had these massive infrastructure plans, like the Continental Hydrology Project. That seems like it would require more than a 16-hour work week.
It was an incredible undertaking. They wanted to link all the major rivers and lakes across the continent to completely reshape transportation and power generation. And while they saw it as the height of efficiency, critics pointed out that it would cause unbelievable environmental destruction. So much for being purely scientific and objective.
So for our listeners, that comparative analysis is key. Let's put technocracy up against the other big ideas of the time. Scott famously said technocracy was so far left that we make communism look bourgeois. What did he mean by that?
His logic was based on methodology. He argued that even communists still used the price system. They still had money, wages, debt. Technocracy, by getting rid of money entirely for their energy certificate, went a step beyond both capitalism and communism in his view.
But the traditional left wasn't buying it.
Not at all. Socialists had huge problems with it. They criticized the technocrats for abandoning the socialist labor theory of value. They felt swapping labor for energy was just trading one arbitrary unit for another. And, more importantly, the lack of any voting was completely at odds with the socialist desire for direct democracy.
And what about fascism?
Fundamentally incompatible. There was actually a German technocratic society that formed in 1933, but it was shut down by 1935. The Nazis suppressed them because they kept ties with American technocrats. And get this, translated material that praised Albert Einstein.
Who was Jewish?
Exactly.
Yeah.
An immediate target. And in Italy, Mussolini just had 26 scientists and engineers arrested for even advocating for it. So for all its elitism, technocracy was ultimately crushed by political ideologies.
So to wrap this up, we've looked at the modern fight over Greenland, driven by security, resources, and politics. And we've looked at the historical technocracy movement, driven by a belief that scientific management was the only answer to resource abundance. What's the key takeaway when you put these two stories together?
I think the link is technological disruption and the fight over who benefits. The technocrats saw the machines of the 1930s creating an abundance the old economic system couldn't handle. Today, with AI and automation, we're having almost the exact same debates about technological unemployment and how to distribute resources fairly. The questions they asked are back, and they're more relevant than ever.
That really is the core question, isn't it? The one they faced then and the one Greenland faces now. Can governing be a purely technical engineering problem? Can you just manage a society with metrics and data?
Or does it have to be political? Messy, human, and based on things like popular will and national sovereignty, the very things the people of Greenland demanded when they said Greenland belongs to Greenlanders.
Yeah.
That tension between technical efficiency and political legitimacy is something we're absolutely going to continue to grapple with.
Se você gostou da aula, por gentileza, inscreva-se no canal, ative o sininho, deixe o seu like e compartilhe o vídeo com os colegas, pois isso nos ajuda a manter o canal. Obrigado.